Veterans Affairs Committee the opportunity to highlight Veterans Day observance. And I apologize on behalf of the Veterans Committee for our slides not being displayed in a timely manner, but we're going to try to do the best we can at this point. First slide. Could you bring up the first slide, please? Thank you. The Veterans Affairs Committee is a unique group that has not only the love for people in the community, but the entire country. You do not need to be a veteran to be a part of our committee. The only requirement is that you be a member of the branch in good standing. So please come out and join the Veterans Committee, and so we can make an impact in the community. Slide. The Veterans Affairs mission is that we seek to establish a working relationship with the agencies in government, national, state, local, and having the responsibilities in the affairs of members of the various armed services and veterans, and to see that those programs to which they are responsible are administered fairly and justly to members of the minority community. We also study conditions pertaining to veterans and members of the military service, their dependents and survivors in the community. We serve as a center of information on matters affecting the members of the active military, reserves, state, National Guard, and veterans. We received and act on all veterans' complaints relative to discrimination on account of race, color, or creed, or denial of benefits in local areas because of discrimination. Slide. The committee would be remiss not to mention a few of the armed services during this presentation. There are 6 main service branches of the military, and each branch has a role in maintaining the U.S. national defense posture. The 6 main branches of the military are Air Force, Army, Coast Guard, Marine Corps, Navy, and the newest one is the Space Force, which was established in December 20th, 2019. The Space Command oversees critical satellite infrastructure, missile warning systems, intelligence gathering capabilities, and meteorology. The Space Force is a military service that organizes, trains, and equips forces to protect the U.S. and allied interests in space and to provide space capabilities to the joint force. Our next presenter will be Mr. Michael Tom. Michael, can you please take it from here?
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to give you a brief history of how Veterans Day came about. Slide 4, please. World War I, known as at the time the Great War, officially ended when the Treaty of Versailles was signed on June 28, 1919, in the Palace of Versailles outside the town of Versailles, France. Slide 5, please. However, fighting ceased 7 months earlier when an armistice or temporary cessation of hostilities between the Allied nations and Germany went into effect on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. Slide 6, please. For that reason, November 11, 1918 is generally regarded as the end of the war to end all wars. In November 1919, President Wilson proclaimed November 11 as the first commemoration of Armistice Day. Slide 7, please. The original concept of the celebration was for a day observed with parades and public meetings and a brief suspension of business beginning at 11 a.m. Slide 8, please. An act of 1938 made the 11th of November of each year a legal holiday, a day to be dedicated to the cause of world peace, and thereafter celebrated and known as Armistice Day. Armistice Day was primarily a day set aside to honor veterans of World War I. But in 1954, after World War II had required the greatest mobilization of soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen, and nation's history, after armed forces had fought the aggression in Korea. Slide 9, please. The 83rd Congress, at the urging of the Veterans Service Organization, amended the Act of 1938 by striking out the word armistice and inserting in its place the word veterans. With the approval of this legislation, on June 1, 1954, November 11 became a day to honor American veterans of all wars. Slide 10, please. Veterans Day continues to be observed on November 11, regardless of what day of the week on which it falls. The observance of Veterans Day on November 11 not only preserves the historical significance of the date, but helps focus attention on the important purpose of Veterans Day, a celebration to honor American veterans for their patriotism, love of country, and willingness to serve and sacrifice for the common good. Thank you. Mrs. Carol E., can you please take it from here?
Good afternoon. The theme for this year's Veterans Day is honoring all who served. The post, slide 11, please. The poster for this year's Veterans Day depicts a lone soldier guarding the tomb of the unknown soldier entombed at the Arlington National Cemetery in Washington, D.C. The tomb of the unknown soldier was dedicated on Armistice Day, November the 11th, 1921. This year commemorates 100 years of the dedication of the tomb of the unknown soldier. In later years, the bodies of unidentified soldiers from World War II, the Korean War, and the Vietnam War have been buried along with the original soldier from World War I. Dignitaries and others visit the tomb of the unknown soldier to pay respect to all soldiers that have died in our nation's wars and those who remain unknown. Veterans Day 2021 pays tribute to our history and legacy of recognizing all veterans that fought for our freedom. Our next speaker will be Ms. Beverly Brooks.
Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to introduce one of our members that served in the military and was assigned to the Old Guard unit that patrols the tomb of the unknown soldier. None other than our very own Mr. James Jim Felder. Slide 12, please. James L. Felder has spent his life working for justice as a civil rights activist and South Carolina legislator. A native of Sumter, South Carolina, Mr. Felder spent his early adult years in Washington, D.C., and has lived in Columbia, South Carolina since 1967. Mr. Felder received an undergraduate degree from Clark Atlanta University and earned his Juris Doctor from the Howard University School of Law. He holds a Master of Laws from Atlanta Law School and a Doctorate of Humane Letters from the College of Charleston. Upon graduation from Howard University, Mr. Felder returned to Columbia to direct the South Carolina Voter Education Project. He coordinated a statewide voter registration drive in just 18 months that registered more than 200,000 African Americans to vote. He served as Executive Vice President of Operation Push, now the Rainbow Push Coalition, a membership organization fighting for social change. Mr. Felder also served as Executive Director of the South Carolina Conference of the NAACP and Professor and Chair of the Department of Business and Economics at Allen University. Sergeant Felder also served in the United States Army, and during his tour of duty, he was selected to head the casket team for the late President John F. Kennedy in November 1963. For his service, he earned the Army Commendation Medal. In 1970, Mr. Felder was one of the first 3 Black men elected to the South Carolina legislature since Reconstruction. In 1973, he became the first African American assistant solicitor in South Carolina. Among more than 200 awards and honors, Mr. Felder is a member of the South Carolina Black Hall of Fame and the Clark Atlanta University Athletic Hall of Fame. He continues to lecture at colleges and universities and has written 4 books: I Buried John F. Kennedy, Civil Rights in South Carolina, The Life and Times of Dr. Lund C. Richardson, and The Making of an AME Bishop. He is steward pro tem at Union Station AME Church in Sumter. Mr. Felder still lives in Columbia and has 2 children, Jimmy and Adrian, a son-in-law, Lance Wright Sr., 2 grandsons, Lance II and Sean. Everyone, please give a warm welcome to Mr. Jim Felder. Mr. Jim Felder, please share your story of your great history with the military. Slide 13.
Thank you, Beverly. Thank you, Beverly. I served in the Honor Guard, which culminated in my service in the military, and headed the casket team that buried President John F. Kennedy. My journey to Fort Myer began here at Fort Jackson. I did not want to go into the Army. I wanted to go into the Air Force, but we had the draft back in those days, and my Sumter Selective Service Board needed me to help them meet their quota. So I went kicking and screaming to Fort Jackson in 1962, spent 6 months here, basic training, AIT, and leadership school. Then in June of 1962, I had an opportunity to try out for the Honor Guard. The Honor Guard is based in Washington at Fort Myer, Virginia, which is the home for Arlington National Cemetery. It's all voluntary. And when the Sergeant Major called out the whole battalion to get some men to try out, 10 of us met the criteria. You could not be more than 6'4" or shorter than 5'10". You had to complete high school at least, needed to score at least 90 on every test, and then they would send you up to Fort Myer to try out for the Honor Guard. 10 of us made the cut. We got to Fort Myer and we spent 2 weeks doing every kind of dirty detail you could imagine, including scrubbing the bathroom with a toothbrush. It reminded me of my days when I played to Omega Psi Phi fraternity. After that 2-week period, 2 of us were selected to stay with the Honor Guard. So I spent the next 18 months burying the dead in Arlington National Cemetery. One of those was Medgar Evers in June 1963. He was assassinated in front of his in front of his house with his wife and children looking on by Byron Delana Beckworth. After funeral services in Jackson, Mississippi, they brought the body to Washington, and we buried him in Arlington National Cemetery. That was June 1963. Not knowing that 4 months later, on November 22nd, I would be heading the casket team to bury President Kennedy. Now, how did I end up in that, heading that detail? As General Ralph Bailey can tell you, seniority means everything in the military. And I just happened to be the senior NCO for funerals in Arlington Cemetery when President Kennedy was assassinated. So on that Friday afternoon, on November 22nd, I was on leave because I was short time. I only had 47 days left in the Army. So I was out job hunting. Came out of the Department of Agriculture from an interview, and there I saw some ladies standing around a taxi cab crying. I went over to ask what was going on. The old cab driver said, very cold, very stoic, they just shot Kennedy. That's what I mean they shot Kennedy. He's in Dallas today. Well, that's where they got him, in Dallas. I rushed home to my apartment. I was married, lived off post. The telephone was ringing. It was the first sergeant. He said, Sergeant Felder, you heard what happened to President Kennedy. I said, yes. He said, your leave has been canceled, and you must come out here to Fort Myer, get your casket bearer team together. You've got to go to Dallas to pick up the president's body. By the time we could get transportation and get to Fort Andrews Air Force Base to go to Dallas, President Lyndon Johnson was on his way back to DC with the president's body. Johnson wanted to get out of Texas. First of all, the president had been killed. Governor Connally of Texas was shot. And he didn't know what was going on, so he wanted to get back to DC, and they did. So we went to Andrews Air Force Base and waited on the tarmac for Air Force One to arrive. It touched down around 6:30 in the evening. We took the president's body out, put it in a gray Navy ambulance, and took it to Bethesda Naval Hospital for autopsy and ultimately embalming. We had to provide security. So I had to witness the autopsy. I witnessed the embalming, the changing of the casket. Now, what do you mean by changing of the casket? The casket came up into Dallas, handle got broken on it, and all of the transporting it and moving it around. So at midnight, 3 of his aides had to go out and buy a new casket. They went 2 blocks down the street from Bethesda Naval Hospital to Gawler's Funeral Home, the same funeral home that handled General Colin Powell's service 2 weeks ago. And they walked in the door and they saw this huge African mahogany casket. And they said, that's the one. They brought it back. We put the president's body in it and took it to the White House. It was just an original team, but it was so heavy we had to add 2 additional persons. So you will see an 8-man team handling the president's body. We took it into the White House. Miss Kennedy came downstairs. She had not seen the remains just yet. She opened the casket, or we opened the casket. She looked in. She took her ring and put in the casket. She cut a lock of hair from the president's head and closed the casket. She said, he looks so wax-like. Well, given what the body had been through, the embalmers had done a magnificent job preparing him for viewing, but she did not want the public to see him in that condition. So the casket was never opened again. It laid in state at the White House overnight. The next day, we took it to the US Capitol, placed it in a rotunda on the same catafalque that held Lincoln's casket 100 years before that. And people came from all over the country to view it during that period of time. The rotunda was supposed to close at midnight, but the lines were so long all the way back to what was then called DC Stadium, now RFK, that they kept it open all night. The next day, we moved the casket to the church for final services. After the service was over, that's when he did that iconic salute on the steps of St. Matthew's Cathedral. It made tough old soldiers like me draw a tear or two watching that little fella doing that salute. It was his birthday, and he didn't know what was really going on. All he knew, there was a lot of people dressed in black around him. From St. Matthew's Cathedral, we marched the 2.5 miles alongside the caisson to Arlington National Cemetery. Well, by the time we get there, we're tired because we were moving at a pretty good clip, but we had to take the casket up a hill to be placed at the gravesite. 3 clearly would lead us up the hill, a priest, a rabbi, and a Protestant minister. And they were walking slow, slow, slow. And with each step, that casket was getting heavier and heavier and heavier. So finally, I looked at the young Marine who was across from me, and I said, let's touch these guys with this casket. Hopefully they'll step it up. So we were able to move close to the Protestant minister, who was the last one in that trio. And we touched him. We said, the casket is heavy, can you step it up a bit? And then he moved a little faster. We got it up the hill, and we placed it on the lowering device, and then unfolded the flag, as you will see there on the right.
Next slide.
After the service was over, we folded the flag. I checked it for red. You cannot have any red showing on a flag. And that's the slide you're looking at now. Once that was done, we passed it to the superintendent of the cemetery, which is a whitehead from there. And he didn't pass it to Ms. Kennedy. Our job was over. Well, I thought I was through with Arlington National Cemetery. My leave was reinstated, came home to Sumter for Thanksgiving. Morris College used to play football during those days. And they would always have homecoming on Thanksgiving Day. They asked me to be the Grand Marshal. I did serve willingly. And after that was over, I returned to DC. Got another phone call. This time it was from the wife of my company commander, Captain Mike Groves. She said, Jim, Mike has died. He died at his dining room table, having dinner with his wife and 3-year-old. And she said, I want you to do Mike's funeral. Of course, I had no choice. Didn't want to, but because he was my company commander, he was a great fellow. We played football together at Fort Myer. In those days, all the military installations in Washington had a football team. We would play each other in our own little conference. I was the quarterback. Mike was the center. So on the football field, I was in charge, but back in the barracks, he was in charge. Then Mike Groves' funeral, and I went in to see the first sergeant. When I said, Sergeant Yarp, in 10 days, I had buried the commander-in-chief, the president, and my company commander. I am not going back into Arlington Cemetery again. He looked at me and he smiled. He said, well, Sergeant Felder, we understand your feats, but remember you're still in the Army and you've got to report in here every day until you're out of here. So I did in civilian unit, in civilian clothing, because I had turned in all my uniforms and equipment. So I did not go back to Fort Myer for 20 years. And that was when Joe Louis died, the old boxer. Joe died in Las Vegas, where he was the greeter at Caesar's Palace. They brought the body to Arlington Cemetery. Joe did not qualify to be buried in Arlington at that time because they changed the rules. Joe did serve in the military, but by the time he died, rules changed. The only way servicemen can be buried in Arlington today, if you get killed on active duty, or you spend 20 years in the military, or you get an executive order from the president. One of the best things Ronald Reagan ever did was to grant an executive order to allow Joe Louis to be buried in Arlington National Cemetery. So I went to the funeral with Jesse Jackson, who did the eulogy for Joe Louis. And that was my first visit in 20 years. After the military, after that, I didn't go back again to Arlington Cemetery till sometime when I took my 2 grandboys. And in the visitor center at Arlington, there is a mural on the wall of me and the casket team, what you're looking at here now. I didn't tell the boys about it until they got inside. And so, of course, when they got in, they were looking around and they looked up on the wall and said, "Ah, Papa, that's you." It brought me all the joy in the world. So that's my story with Arlington National Cemetery. I did 11 funerals. What happens is the family only has 30 minutes for a funeral. There were some days we would do 10 funerals, 9 o'clock, 9:30, 10, 10:30, 11. Break for lunch, come back at 1 o'clock, 1:30, 2, 2:30, 3 o'clock is always the last funeral in Arlington Cemetery. No Saturday and Sunday funerals, no holiday funerals. So that's my story. And how did I get involved was the question I would get from people for years. How did you, a little black boy from Sumter, South Carolina, get to be in charge of President Kennedy's funeral? Again, back to seniority, General Bailey. If it had happened 2 weeks earlier, I would have been no place in the picture. The fellow ahead of me got out. I was promoted to senior NCO for funerals. There was never any discussion, again. So that's how I got there. That's my story. And if we have time, Madam President, I'll take any questions that may come up.
Thank you, Mr. Felder, for that wonderful history. You've always been my hero. Thank you so much. I think we may have a few questions in the chat room. Ms. May Jones, can you please read a couple of them off?
Certainly. Well, Mr. Felder, it sounds like you had a lot of wear and tear on your knees during your military career. First question, has anyone other than you served in the military in your family?
Yes, my father was a World War II veteran. I was the Vietnam veteran, and my son served in the military also. He was an Iraq veteran. So there were 3 generations of us in the military.
Wow. You may have mentioned it earlier, but I don't remember. How many years did you serve in the military overall?
Total 20 years overall, 6 years in the Army with the active duty and the reserve status, and then 14 years with the South Carolina National Guard. And at that time, General Ralph Bailey was then Lieutenant Bailey, and he was my platoon person. So we go back a ways together.
I see. Now, how many military funerals have you participated in?
I didn't hear you. Is there another one?
How many military funerals have you participated in?
A total of 1,100 during that 18-month period.
That's a lot of funerals.
It's a lot of funerals, and what happens to you when you do that many funerals, it makes you very cold and just, you lose your feelings, I guess. It becomes a job. You just kind of forget what you're doing because you have a job to do. There were some guys who couldn't handle it because you're standing there over a casket, holding a flag, and you're looking at the family, they're crying, and someone would start crying with the family, and they would have to leave and transfer to some other unit. But it takes a toll on you, but it's a job that you'd volunteer for, so you have to hang with it.
I see. Now, this is this last question is going to be asked. Do you plan on writing another book?
Yes, ma'am. I've done 4. Presently, I'm working on Senator McKinley Washington's biography. McKinley served in the House Carolina House of Representatives and the South Carolina in Sumter. He grew up in the rural section of Sumter. I grew up in the city, so we always kid each other about that country and city boy. But I'm working on his book. We hope to have it out by the 1st of next year.
Okay. Mr. Felder, thank you for
a
your
good
service.
read. You'll learn a lot about. Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, there was a bit of audio interruption there. I was
Okay.
just saying, Mr. Felder, thank you for your service, and that's our last question.
Thank you.
So as you can see on the screen that we've been highlighting some of the books that Mr. Felder has written. Slide 16 is The Life and Times of Dr. Lund C. Richardson and the Making of an AME Bishop. Slide 17, please. Civil Rights in South Carolina, and I Buried John F. Kennedy. His books can be ordered online from www.jameslfelder.com. Now, do we have, again, thank you, Mr. Felder. Thank you, Jim. We surely appreciate you. Now, is Dr. Glenn Brown on, please?
Yes, Dr. Glenn Brown is here.
Okay, Dr. Glenn Brown is going to recite a veteran's poem for us.
Well, this poem is for dedicated to all veterans, but especially to Mr. James Felder. And my question is to
Next slide.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Was that a question for me?
No, it was a dedication to you.
Oh, thank you.
All veterans, but especially to you. But my question is to the civilians. Did you stop to think a veteran today for the price of freedom they had to pay? Did you gaze into their distant eyes? Did you see the ghost that they can't deny? Did you think a soldier heart was made of steel because they were trained to kill that they couldn't feel? Did you see the guilt written on their face for the loss of life that they can't replace? Did you know that they mourn the life that they couldn't save and they walk with comrades in their grave? Do you remember the boy with innocent lost? Do you really know war's ultimate cost? Have you felt the blast of artillery fire? Or do you have the courage it would require? Have you walked with God on a battleground and seen your brothers and sisters dead and dying all around? Did you stop to think a veteran today? Or did you just turn and you walked away from the pain that they carries for the rest of their life? You consider their family, their children, or their wives, who watches them suffer in silence each and every day as they're haunted by memories that don't go away. Did you know that our soldiers are still pulling guards, that their heart and soul will forever be scarred? Do you care how they suffer from PTSD and that our precious freedom is never free? Do you know that they still hear the sound of blood-curdling scream and they return to war each night in their dream? Have you felt the sorrow of a combat vet? Or would you rather forget that the war has pierced their hardened heart and have torn our soldiers all apart? Would you rather our old heroes just fade away? Or would you stop and think a veteran today? Thank you, veterans, for your service. Thank you, Jim Felder. God bless.
Well, thank you, Mr. Brown. We appreciate that. There is no way that we can follow that. I tell you that. That was great. Thank you so much. Next slide. Next slide. The Veterans Affairs Committee, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule, Mr. Felder, to speak today so we can give you your flowers now. We stand on your shoulders and all who have mentored you, Mr. Felder, and we thank you for your steadfast perseverance and your intestinal fortitude for all you have done for this city, this state, and ultimately this country. It has been our honor, sir, our honor indeed. Madam President, this concludes the Veterans Affairs Committee presentation.
Madam
Job well
President.
done, everyone. Would you kindly put your hands together for the Veterans Affairs Committee, and most important for Mr. James Felder, who I've known forever, seems like. But
Madam President.
Outstanding, outstanding.
Madam President,
yes.
this is Ralph Bailey. I cannot let Jim get away since he mentioned me as being his lieutenant, but I also ended up being his company commander. But Jim was my mentor. Anytime I had any kind of little problem, that was the first person I went to. And I want him to know I appreciate that. I thank you. I salute you. Without him, it would have been some real trouble down there. So I do appreciate you.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey, for that comment. I'm quite sure Jim kept you out of a lot of trouble. Somewhere in form or fashion, I'm quite sure. Veterans, we again say we appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you for putting this together, and we look forward to more of your talents and sharing of your experiences. Mr. Felder, you were getting ready to say something?
Madam President.
Yes.
Madam President.
Yes.
Just one other comment about Arlington Cemetery. Former slaves were the first to be buried in Arlington National Cemetery. After the war, many of them migrated to the north. They had no place to stay, so they lived out on the Arlington plantation. And when they died, they buried them right there in the cemetery. Section 4 of Arlington Cemetery is the home for many former slaves. So if you ever visit, be sure the tour guide takes you by that section so you can see our ancestors who were buried there.
Thank you so very much
Thank
again. Right, job well done. I'm going to move forward with just a few comments that I need to share with everyone. We have selected, we meaning the executive committee, have selected the theme for the 2022 year. We thought it was fitting, and which is Still We Rise, Forward Fighting. Forward fighting is we added the Still We Rise because we used that last year. We added on to that the forward fighting. That is the theme for the national. And so we just put the two together and thought it was fitting to do so. Still we rise. Forward fighting. Fighting forward, I'm sorry. Still we rise, fighting forward. That be the theme for the 2022. We need to reiterate, as Mr. Kirkwood has said, this redistricting is no joke, y'all. Those lines, and I'm probably talking to the choir right now, but I need the choir to be singing to other people who may not realize or know the importance of this redistricting. It's so important, I can't even say the words sometimes. But please note that those lines are being drawn as we are speaking. So if you have any idea, contact Mr. Kirkwood, who in that committee, our redistricting committee, so they can make it known what we feel about the lines being drawn as the Columbia branch NAACP. Am I correct, Ms. Kirkwood? And this will take us, these lines will take us through the next 10, 12 years until the next census is made. And we need folks to be, they have moved everybody out of the city of Columbia. We have lost votes within the city because of the different homes that were torn down. I'm talking about Saxon Homes, Gonzales Gardens, and one or two others. And they have moved all of those people out of the city into the county. And those were thousands of potential votes that we could have had. So encourage, think about it. I know we talk about gentrification, which means that the rich folks are buying inside the city, and we probably won't, meaning people of color, won't be able to afford. But there's always one way to skin a monkey. Say that for me. Y'all know how to say that, what I'm talking about. So be careful, those that can afford, and don't mind sharing and uplifting the homes that we have. I wish it was a way that we could really help those homes, the people that are in the homes are more seasoned people who will be leaving. I wish that there was a way that we could come up with helping them to retain and keep their dwellings so that we won't lose specifically those homes, and secondly, those votes, which are very important amongst this time. Mr. Kirkwood, chime in if you need to.
Hi, Ms. Glover. The only
Yes.
thing I wanted to mention in regard to what you stated, and I agree wholeheartedly, especially as somebody that lives in St. Andrews and has seen a lot of folk move out this way from the city, is that, as I'm sure a lot of you are aware, this affected the election that we just had within the city of Columbia. There were areas that were annexed in the last 10 years that are out in the hinterlands on the eastern part of the city, which is the more conservative portion, to be quite honest. And also, as Ms. Glover correctly stated, there were populations that have been moved within the last few years within the city of Columbia. Those people could not vote. And this is just my opinion, that had a direct impact on both the mayoral election as well as the at-large election. So again, we need to be cognizant of that. We need to be aware of that. Granted, we have to work with our new legislators because the people, albeit a smaller number, have spoken, but just be diligent and be vigilant and just be aware of how these things affect us in the overall Columbia community.
Thank you, Mr. Kirkwood. And I'm going to reiterate, we need to talk about it because everybody doesn't understand, y'all. So the choir needs to sing, and you need to be singing what you know, and make sure you're singing the truth because it does matter from this point on. And to encourage people, don't be scared of these census. It's just a number count. Be counted. That's your voting power right there. A segment of being able, because your voice is your vote, really. Your vote is your voice. So we need to handle that all the way around. I would like to say as well that our voting campaign for 2022 will be spearheaded by the Young Adult Committee and the Political Action. I do know that Youth Council does a very good job of getting out there as well. So we are hoping that all three of those committees will collaborate and make it strong. We would like to see us do what Jim Felder did whenever the year he did. How many were they? 20,000 or whatever the number it was he had. So we could, but we need to reiterate, you can be registered to vote, but you need to go vote. We need to come up with an idea of how to get these people out to vote. We can register them all day, all night, all year long, but if they're not going to the polls, it's a waste of our time. So I'm going to charge those three committees to come up with, well, all of us, to come up with some type of idea of how to get the people to vote. They started by letting us feed them and bringing the water and all of that, all of the above. But Jim, correct me if I'm wrong. Are they trying to put a stop to that? I know in some states they have.
That's correct.
Yeah.
You're correct. Mhm.
So are we able to stand across the street and offer that?
They now
You're frozen.
don't want you to do that either. So we have work to do. We got serious work to do in terms of the voting process and the policies as well.
Correct. So we will be inviting in the voters registration folks to come in to enlighten us on some of the policies and rules and regulations so that we can hear it from the horse's mouth, the do's and don'ts. And hopefully that will be done in January. Mr. Felder,
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Peterkin, let's get it done, please, so we'll know which road to take in that and with that avenue. Okay. All righty. As I mentioned earlier, Ms. Nash resigned as secretary on Monday, November the 1st, and Ms. May Jones has stepped up in her place. May was the assistant secretary. She can be reached at sec1.columbiascbranch@gmail.com. That's sec1.columbiascbranch@gmail.com. The branch belongings were returned from Ms. Nash through Mr. Kirkwood to Ms. Jones on Thursday, November the 18th. So Ms. Jones has to siphon through that stuff to see what's there, et cetera, so she can be on top of what you all need to know. I just ask that you have the patience while this transition is going through. We also want to inform you that the bylaws, the executive committee did 2 readings on the proposed bylaws, amended 1991 bylaws, and they are ready to share them with the body, the branch body, which will be done tomorrow. You will be getting an email with those of you with the proposed bylaws that have been recommended by the executive committee of the branch. And I am asking that we have a meeting soon so that we can get this off and running to the national governance director before the end of this month, before December. So again, I'm repeating myself so you can hear me, and you will have 7 days. Once you receive them, you will have 7 days to review the recommended proposed bylaws from the executive committee. So, do I have any questions with that?
Ms. Glover, I'd just like to say that anybody who did not receive an email yesterday or last night, if they would submit that to Ms. Jones so that her email list can be updated.
Thank you. I want to recommend that we have a call meeting with the membership Thursday, December the 2nd. And that's my recommendation. That gives you exactly 10 days to review the bylaws. But we have to come together as a unit, as a branch in order to do so.
Madam
May I
President.
ask a question?
Yes,
I'm a new member, but a renewing member. I was a member some years ago. I have not been receiving the emails. I've been getting them sent to me via Lois Miniweather. So I just heard someone say to let someone know, and I'm just trying to find out again who that is and how do I let that person know?
Ms. People, are you able to put your email within the chat? And I have your email as well. I will share it, but if you could put your email in the chat.
Okay.
Jones is the person that was mentioned.
Okay.
Put your email out of the chat.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
I certainly will. Thank you.
I'm sorry about that, but we're gonna get you straight, Ms. Phoebe.
That's okay. And I'd also like to say, if you need any help getting those emails out, I'm willing to help with that as well.
Thank you. Maybe
Madam
not.
President,
Yes, Ms. Jones.
I'm sorry, I was about to make a motion.
Motion,
Yes, ma'am. I was going to make a motion on behalf of the Bylaws Committee that a request for a call meeting for December 2nd, 2021 for the vote on the membership acceptance of the proposed bylaws.
Second the motion.
did you state the time? Would you
Oh,
state-
at 7 p.m. I make a motion to request a call meeting for December the 2nd, 2021 at 7 p.m. for the vote on the membership acceptance of the proposed bylaws.
It has been moved that the body meet again on December the 2nd, which is Thursday at 7 p.m. to review the proposed bylaws recommended by the executive committee. And I believe we need a second on that.
I did second. I seconded.
Mr. James Felder seconded. Is there any discussion?
I have a question.
Question. Hey, Ms. Singletary, how are you?
Hey, I'm well. How are you? Are we to send any ideas or corrections or updates or suggestions to Ms. Jones or anyone before the meeting for consideration, or is that all to be done at the meeting? I just think that if we could have hash that out before the meeting, it would not take up as much time, or at least give it to the committee so that they could look at it beforehand.
That's a good idea. And if everybody's okay with it, I will ask that any of you that have any questions and or concerns, that you send them to Ms. Jones, who's also the chair for the bylaws committee, to review prior to meeting on the 7th after we take this vote.
The 2nd or 7th?
Second, December.
Okay, 2nd. Thank you.
December the 2nd at 7 o'clock. So
okay,
the motion has been made and second, and the discussion to send. So we're going to amend the motion, if we will, please, with that suggestion. Ms. Jones, will you amend the motion with that suggestion?
Okay. I make the motion that a request for a call meeting be for December 2nd, which is on a Thursday at 7 p.m. for the vote on the membership acceptance of the proposed bylaws, and for those members that have questions or suggestions, they can send this information to me at the email address scc.columbiascbranch.com.
SEC1.
I'm sorry, scc1.columbiascbranch.com.
Madam Chair,
second the amended motion.
Let me correct the email address, please. It's sec1.columbiascbranch@gmail.com.
Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry, at Gmail.
SEC1, the number 1, .columbiascbranch@gmail.com. It has been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It has been moved and second. Any other discussion?
Madam President, Jean Blakely Parks, and my question is there going to be a deadline for those submissions? Because we don't want submissions coming in the day of. So is there going to be a cutoff time to get those in if you have any questions? Is my
is what I'm asking.
Thank you for that question, Ms. Parks. I'm going to stay, I'll settle the cutoff date. We are looking for December the 2nd. So right after the holiday, it all depends really on when the committee is going to meet again. So I will say November the 29th be the cutoff date for me. Any suggestions and
Doing it while this meeting is going on.
okay. So I would like to get this motion moved and passed if can be. If there are no other comments or questions, are you ready for the question? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Having none, we will meet, the body of the Columbia branch, will meet on December the 2nd, at Thursday, December the 2nd at 7 p.m. via Zoom to discuss the proposed bylaws that was recommended by the executive committee. This body will have 10 days to review. If you have any questions and or concerns, please submit them to the branch secretary, May Jones, at sec1.columbiasouthscbranch@gmail.com by November the 29th. All minds clear? Thank you.
Yes.
It has been moved, so moved. I believe with that being said, and I thank you for this time, and y'all, we only meet once a month. So sometimes it takes a little longer than the other. I'm going to encourage you too. We have these committees. We need people to join the different committees. And that means you. Don't sit back. Thank you to those that have been working diligently with the committees that we have already and have not. And thank you for those who show up to the different activities and share your concerns and ideas with the different committees. We just need you to step up. We have 600 and some odd members at this point, if a little more. And we need more than 50 people doing things. So I'm requesting that those of you that have the ability to assist, to please dial a digit, dial mine. You know, I don't mind talking, 803-361-5470. Don't have me come for you. We won't do this. And I will also say this, as I've said to the executive committee. I attended the school district 2 meeting on last week. Thank God it was nice and calm. They had a very good meeting. Dr. Grant presented well. We will be asking her, the education department committee will be asking her to come in and report to us so we will know what's going on in the multicultural atmosphere, what she's in charge of. So I appreciate that being able to be done. We need to know everything, any and everything we should know, because we all have children, grandchildren, work in the system, or whatever the deal might be, and we need to know exactly what's going on. Right, Ms. Kirkwood? So with that
Yes,
being
ma'am, absolutely.
any questions and or concerns at this point for me or any of us?
What we gonna eat?
I'm looking at a statement in by Jonathan Kirkwood, and it says, this is a recommendation. The NAACP Columbia branch can publish a document that explains what each elected office does, as well as a specific what is this, WIFM, what's in it for me?
With them, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So we can connect voting to how it, affects. Everybody can see that in the chat. and what would happen if they do or don't vote. Very good. Good idea, Mr. Kirkwood. That can be put in the hands of those that are coming up with this effort to get the people out to vote. Any other questions concerning? Everybody understand what's going on? Everybody's good? I'm going to say have the joyous of family holiday, which is the Thanksgiving and Christmas has come up. Don't forget, if you can nod your head at somebody to say thank you, be sure to do that, especially our veterans, especially our homeless, especially those that may not have. I ask that you reach out in some type of form. And if you can come up with an idea that this branch can do, adopt somebody or a highway or something. I'm being facetious, but let's think about it and let's go into 2022 with a positive mind and a caring heart. If nobody told any of you today, I'm telling you now, I love you like Jesus does. And I look forward to talking to each and every one of you soon. With that being said, I'm going to ask, one of you is Reverend Hicks still on? Not, Mr. Tom, would you carry us out in prayer, please?
Let's bow our heads. Heavenly Father, we thank you once again for allowing us to come together and do the work of this branch. As we leave, Lord, we ask that you would guide and protect each of us. These and all blessings we ask in the name of your Son and our Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Veterans Affairs and Mr. Felder again. Peace and blessings to you all. Bye-bye.
Thanksgiving.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.